Election season is now in full swing, and voters are listening carefully to the ideas and policies of their candidates and taking the full measure of their vision and intentions for the future of this country if they're Republican voters. If they're Democrat voters, of course, they have no idea what their candidates believe, and they've simply been hypnotized into stupidity by media flunkies with all the integrity of jack-in-the-box jesters who bob up and down on their springs with grinning faces, chattering mesmeric platitudes until they've turned the Democrat Party into a shambling mob of idiots, shuffling toward November with slack mouths and empty eyes as if they were zombies. If zombies were lemmings, if lemmings actually walked blindly off cliffs like zombies who were lemmings, acting like zombies, or like Democrats. So today, as an exclusive service of the DailyWire, we're going to fill in the blanks left by the many, many incisive and probing interviews Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will never do because just look at them. That couldn't end well. So, what does Kamala Harris actually believe? Well, on the environment, she believes we should absolutely ban fracking as long as we don't ban fracking, but only ban fracking, which she won't do, but will. She proudly stands on a record of supporting the Green New Deal through a bill deceptively named the Inflation Reduction Act, so she doesn't have to proudly stand on her record of supporting the Green New Deal, which sucks. Kamala is also proud of her role as border czar, which she never was, although before she never was, when she was, she did many good things which decreased illegal immigration by declaring no immigrant is illegal, so now there is no illegal immigration, problem solved. She also called Donald Trump's border wall, quote, an un-American, stupid waste of money on a medieval vanity project. And she promises she'll build it too, to end illegal immigration, which she ended when she was never border czar, but totally was. On the economy, Kamala says she knows Americans are suffering from raging inflation, but she says that inflation was caused by Donald Trump's reckless actions, like not being president. So Americans should vote for a change by sending Kamala to the White House, where she already is. All right, what about foreign policy? Well, when it comes to Israel, Kamala completely supports Israel's right to exist as long as they don't do it in any recognizable material form. That would be imperialism or settler colonialism or just too many Jews in one place called Israel. And Kamala believes those Jews have the right to defend themselves as long as that doesn't stop people from killing them. Because after all, the killers are people too with hopes and dreams like the destruction of Israel. Now, as for vice presidential candidate Tim Walz, his positions are a little clearer. For instance, he says he wants to protect the constitutional right to bear arms by banning the weapons of war he carried in war, which is none. So problem solved. But Americans can trust Walz because he's just a down-home, regular, plaid shirt-wearing Midwestern football coach who wants to cut the off children, just like any totally normal, all-American Midwesterner. Ed Gein say, or any of those other Midwesterners who look totally normal until one day you open the newspaper and you're like, holy crap, so many mutilated. And he looked completely normal. How could we ever have known? But the important thing is Walz supports abortion. I mean, the guy just has a thing for butchering children. There's no sense lingering on it. It's just too disturbing. Let's move on. So there you have it. Democrat voters, if you've gone to Kamala Harris's website and you've noticed there's not a single policy proposal there, and you've said to yourself, hey, wait, how come my mouth is hanging open and I'm shuffling mindlessly toward November as if I'm some kind of zombie lemming about to vote for a candidate who believes in absolutely nothing? Now you know that Kamala Harris does, in fact, believe in what she says, which is absolutely nothing. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show. All right, we are back laughing our way through the fall of the Republic. In 7 short days, Matt Walsh's Am I Racist will grace our nation's silver screens. It's a hilarious tale of one man's journey through the absurd landscape of modern racial politics. Theaters are selling out faster than you can say diversity training, with new venues popping up daily. Get your tickets now at AmIRacist.com. You know, also, while you're doing that, because we have the culture covered here at the Daily Wire, pick up a copy of my new mystery. You can pre-order it now. It's called A Woman Underground. It's a story in which the detective Cameron Winter races a killer to find his old flame in American streets that are being torn apart by civil strife. I think you will really love it. And even if you don't, you should buy it because it matters. It will keep the series going. It will keep the last truly terrific author on the conservative side in print. So I don't want to hear from you about, oh, my children are hungry or I've got to pay the rent. Come on, buy the book. Seriously, go out and pre-order A Woman Underground. I would not sell it to you if you weren't going to love it. You will love it, and you'll probably love the whole series if you take it on. So we had a great interview this week with the insane Sebastian Gorka. You should take a look at that. And next week, we're going to be talking to an even more insane Matt Walsh and even vastly more insane Justin Folk about their new film, Am I Racist? And just as a spoiler, yes, they are. If you leave a comment on YouTube or on DailyWire Plus, and that comment would ruin your reputation because it exposes you as a racist, sexist, homophobic, dirt-minded, obscene, terrible conservative, why, by golly, we'll read it right here on the air because we're just like you. Ricardo Jackson has the comment this week. He says, I think listening to Klavan makes my life better. It's too bad it's turning me into a free-thinking monster capable of rational thought. That is too bad, but there are drugs that you can take for that or just turn on the TV. That usually works as well. Let's get to today's episode, Why America is Like a Horror Movie. Now, one of the things about this show that I think it makes the show really different, in fact, to be honest with you, I think it makes the show unique, and you may think it's bad unique, you may think it's good unique, but the difference is that I just believe, and I have actually put this into operation, and I proved it to my satisfaction. I believe that the soul of a nation or a society is expressed through the culture, and the soul of the culture is expressed through the arts. And unlike every other conservative commentator alive, I actually love the arts, and I've been immersed in them my entire life, not just making them, but watching them and experiencing them. So instead of the news, I try to bring you the soul of the nation, which explains why the news is taking place. So I'm going to do something a little different this week. Instead of getting to the end of the show after talking about politics and talking then about the culture, I'm going to talk about the culture first and hope that it explains some of the things that have been happening this week. So I spent part of this week doing something I almost never do, which is watching horror movies, and I'll explain why. Chapter 1, The Big Jump Scare. Now, I've talked about this a lot, the fact that we're going through a period when the arts are uncannily dead. I mean, there's really nothing good going on, and this tells us something about the nation's soul, not that it's dead, but simply that it's kind of, let's say, in hibernation. Something has gone wrong. There's some kind of expression that's not coming out. Now, when I say the arts are dead, that doesn't mean there's nothing good to read or watch. There are always good things being turned out. Right now, for instance, Carl Hyacин's Bad Monkey with Vince Vaughn is very entertaining. And I'm hearing good things about the remake of Presumed Innocent, just talking about things off the top of my head. And of course, A Woman Underground is coming out, as you'd know, because you're already pre-ordering it while I'm speaking to you. A Woman Underground that you're going to want to see because that is also a contribution to the arts. So there are good things going out there. A lot of them on Apple TV, where, by the way, they've kept the kind of non-woke lane open during this time of wokeness. And they even have some hint of normal and conservative content. But just speaking generally, this is what I mean. Music sucks. Nothing new or interesting is happening in the music. The movies are basically over. That doesn't mean there are no good movies. It just means that the kind of excitement that the movies used to generate in the old days is gone. The golden age of TV is over. Again, that doesn't mean there's no good TV, but if you can remember back to 2000 when Sopranos and The Shield or things like Game of Thrones and everybody was just riveted to that, you didn't have enough time to watch the TV that was coming out. That's what it's like when the arts are really cooking, and that's not happening now. There are not a lot of books that are innovative, except for The Woman Underground. I may have mentioned that that's coming out, and you want to pre-order that right away. A very subtle recreation of the classic mystery novel, so you want to take a look at that. But what I think I'm trying to send subliminal messages here. But one area that is actually thriving is horror movies. And this is partly just commercial. They're cheap to make. Kids like them, young people like them, and fear is the easiest emotion to elicit, especially jump scares, what they call in Hollywood boo scares sometimes, which is just when something suddenly pops out at you, or the phone rings, and they pump up the volume so it startles you. I mean, my little grandson is 3 years old. He can jump out from behind a door and go boo, and it will startle you in exactly the same way. It is not a hard thing to do. But that doesn't mean the fact that these horror movies are coming out doesn't say something about where we are, and that the movies themselves, artists can't help but say something about where they are. Even bad artists say something about where we are. They just can't help it because that's what artists do. They are a soul in time expressing the experience of the human soul in time. Now, I hate horror movies. I like suspense movies, I like ghost movies, I like spooky movies, scary movies, but I hate movies that use gore and disgust and jump scares to get at me because I feel they're cheap and easy and they don't really do anything for me. They don't move my consciousness in any way. And so I fall behind when it comes to horror movies. So to catch up, I chose 3 films I'd heard about and I'd heard different people say different things about. Two of them got good reviews, one not so much. The first one, and they all had one thing in common, which was really interesting to me, and I didn't know this before I started watching them, but the first one was Exorcist Believer, and this is an attempt to reboot the original Exorcist, of course, which came out a long time ago and was based on a novel by William Peter Blatty. In this one, 2 girls get possessed, but remember the original. You have to, in order to hear what I'm saying, you have to remember the original. A priest is struggling with his faith. A demon possesses a child. She's flying up on the ceiling. Her face is falling apart. Filth is coming out of her mouth. Her neck spins around and all this stuff. And she's turned against God. She's cursing the church, all these obscenities. And the devil has a purpose. The devil is a fallen angel. He's a spiritual being, not a physical being. And he's getting back at God for creating his rival, the human race. And this is one of his minions, a demon that has taken over this child. And the church, which is God's body, which is represented by this flawed priest, has to fight for the child's soul at great sacrifice. And the child finally is freed of this demon and realizes that her friend is the church. It ends with her not really remembering what happened to her, but giving a kiss to the priest. And this was the book is based is by a very, very Catholic writer, devout Catholic writer, William Peter Blatty. Everything he wrote was imbued with Catholicism. So in this film, Believer, the possessed girl's father, played by Leslie Odom Jr., good acting, goes to Ellen Burstyn, who played the mom in the original, who was fighting for her child's life, who got brought in the priest, didn't believe in any of it, but saw this stuff happen. And she played the mother of the possessed girl, Reagan. And here's their exchange when the father goes to her for help, because now she's written a self-help book about being possessed. And this is a bit of the exchange the father has with her. Cut 1.
Do you believe any of this stuff is actually real?
Placebos are real. The power of suggestion is real. Belief is real. I think what you're asking me is if I believe any of this stuff will really help your daughter. But what you should be asking is if you believe it.
See, what I'm asking is, what the hell is she talking about? A woman who saw what happened in that first movie, if she is not a devout Catholic, if she's not on the border of being a nun, she is a flaming idiot, right? You have to be in the incredible denial not to be a Catholic after what you saw in that first movie, right? Instead, she says, well, it's like placebos are real. God is like a placebo, a fake pill, but we believe in it, and that's where its reality comes from. That's what she's saying. So any version of the story is true if you believe it, and all the different cultural religions have to show up, and they mock the power, the exclusive power of the Catholic Church. They make fun of the Catholic Church by giving it a big buildup and then turning it around on it. So we reboot the franchise to say exactly the opposite of what the story of The Exorcist says, because we're so superior to that story with its God and that's ridiculous. And this film, there's so much blather in this film about what people are and who we believe, and people just stand together. But the point is, God is nowhere. Only people have good agency, and only all spiritual power is evil power. Then there's the movie Smile. Now, this is directed by Parker Finn. He made a short story, and this is called Laura Hasn't Slept, and this is a sequel to that, and it was a very big hit, and it could have been a good picture. It has a solid story. It has Sosie Bacon, who's the daughter of Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick, and she delivers an excellent excellent, vulnerable performance, but there are just too many jump scares. And then, as I said, anybody can do a jump scare. Every 2 minutes, something pops out at you in this picture. I can barely watch it because I don't like it how it feels and it doesn't do anything for me. But the idea is really interesting. It's a smart story. Sosie Bacon plays a therapist, and she's the therapist because her mom committed suicide, and she wants to help people, and she uncovers a viral curse that causes people to smile eerily, which is scary in and of itself, and then they kill themselves. And the film says something true, that psychiatry dismisses the idea of spiritual evil and thinks that it is internal and thinks it's basically just a mind thing. And it misses the truth that evil is real. So Bacon's character is ultimately helpless because there's spiritual evil, but no spiritual good. And this is, by the way, I've talked about this once before. This is a strain in movies that you can see this idea of psychiatry. When Psycho was made in the 1960s, psychiatry was all the rage. And so the psychiatrist comes on and explains everything. And he's the voice of authority. And then by the time Halloween is made in the 70s, the psychiatry says, I saw, Michael Myers and he's just evil. There's nothing I can do about evil because I'm just a psychiatrist. And then by the time he gets the Silence of the Lambs, the psychiatrist is the evil because he's a materialist. He's a cannibal, which is the most materialist you can get because it turns human beings to meat. So in this movie, Smile, they're telling you the psychiatrist has no power, but there's also no other power. I don't think anybody mentions God. I don't think anybody talks about God. There is just a quote unquote entity, a demonic power that has this power over people. But even that is almost a physical thing. There's just evil and there's really no good. And that is finally is true of Long Legs too, the third movie I watched. This is directed and written by Osgood Perkins, who is the son of Anthony Perkins, who was, of course, the star of Psycho. He was Norman Bates in Psycho, and it has Micah, I believe her name is pronounced, Monroe from It Follows, and Nicolas Cage is the bad guy. Now, this film was vastly overpraised. Osgood Perkins is really talented. I predict really good things for him if his career keeps going. He really knows what he's doing. It's got a great atmosphere. It's got good performances. It's well done. But it's just not that scary, and they keep saying that Nicolas Cage is as good as Anthony Perkins in Silence of the Lambs. Anthony Perkins is the greatest actor of his generation. That performance is one of the greatest performances ever caught on film. This is just, Nicolas Cage eating up the scenery. Anthony Hopkins, I'm sorry, I said Anthony Perkins. Yeah, but this is just Nicolas Cage eating up the scenery. But again, the killer is literally satanic, but there's no response of good from the spirit world. There is no God. So here the detective confronts her mother about the killer who is actually lurking in their past, and neither of them know it, which accounts for the kind of alienated dullness of their characters and the almost crazy aspect of her mother. This is their confrontation in the middle of the film, cut 2.
Will you tell me the honest truth about something?
I'll try.
Do you still say your prayers?
No, Mom. I never said my prayers, never once. They scared me. What's so funny?
You're right. No, our prayers don't help us. Prayers don't do a thing.
Okay, so 3 horror films, big horror films, especially the second 2, very highly praised, in which evil is a spiritual force, but good is just us, trying to keep the spiritual force away. Our beliefs, our psychology, ultimately we're helpless, or if we're not, we fight it, as best we can. And the final image of Long Legs is an ability to maybe rescue some people, but helplessness in the face of the evil itself. Now, what's the result of that attitude, which is obviously being generated by the culture through the elites, the voices of the elites? Now, as you know, I think that the loss of faith among our elite communicators is a bad thing for one reason only, which is because there is a God, and when you get reality wrong, you get everything else wrong as well. If you're not acting in reality, you're acting in a fantasy world, and that's really dangerous. But the exact effect is worth considering. Now, I've talked a lot about the Nietzschean idea that if you kill God, the weak, love the poor Jewish God, whom Nietzsche understood had become the God of the West through the Jewish Savior, Jesus Christ. This is why there was a lot of anti-Semitism. Then when he's gone, when that God is gone, we go back to strong men inventing morality themselves, right? Which is also the idea of the Marquis de Sade, the guy we get sadism from. There's no morality. But then we have Albert Camus, and I don't talk about him a lot. I haven't talked about him a lot, but he's actually the only one of the French existentialists from the 50s that I really respect, because he was a decent human being and has a certain amount of humanity and he wrote well. And he talked about the rebel, the radical, all right? We're talking about a radical who feels that either there is no God or God is a bad guy, God is bad, all the spiritual stuff is evil, and therefore human beings have to fight with the spiritual world. So that's kind of what we're seeing in these films. And he says the radical rejects God, and instead of a perfect God and a sinful humanity striving in humility to move toward God's spiritual good, the radical's logic leads him to believe in a sinful or absent God, the evil spirits, and a blameless humanity who is capable of perfection. This is Albert Camus. I'm paraphrasing. Innocent mankind has to create perfect justice that God should have created, but he didn't. And this is what this Camus says. He says, from the hour when the Marquis de Sade absolutely rejected God, progress has consisted in gradually enlarging the stronghold where, according to his own rules, man without God brutally wields power. So our own innocence against God's cruelty means we have to wield power, including murdering people and oppressing anyone who opposes our goodness. And Camus says, where once the tyrant raised cities for his own greater glory, now we build slave camps under the flag of freedom. Slave camps under the flag of freedom and massacres justified by philanthropy, says Camus. So you look at these movies, you see a spiritual evil, essentially the bad God, and only mankind, perfectible mankind, is there to stop it. This is why in these horror films, even though they don't know it, even though they don't know this was expressing, the ultimate jump scare is tyranny. Now, like you, I used to be foolish enough to think I was being clever by using incognito mode. But I got smart. Because did you know that Google recently settled a $5 billion lawsuit after being accused of secretly tracking incognito browsing data? Google's defense was, incognito does not mean invisible, meaning all your online activity is still 100% visible to a ton of third parties. Your internet provider, cell company, even the tech guy at your office can see every site you visit. That's why I never go online without ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN reroutes all your traffic through secure, encrypted servers. That means those nosy third parties can't see your browsing history. By hiding my IP address on all my devices, I'm able to stay private on the go. Whether I'm at home, at the office, at my local coffee shop, I can rest assured knowing ExpressVPN has my back. Plus, it's ridiculously easy to use. Open the app, click one button, you're done. If I haven't convinced you yet, ExpressVPN is rated #1 by tech experts like CNET and The Verge. In today's world, privacy isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. So protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/Klavan. That's expressvpn.com/Klavan. You can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/ how do you spell it? It's KLAVAN. Chapter 2, The Monster Called Shut-Uppery. Now, C.S. Lewis noticed this Camus effect that perfectible man is going to oppress people if he doesn't have faith in a God toward which each individual must move, a spiritual good. He says, of all tyrannies, says C.S. Lewis, of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely expressed for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated, but those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. So remember this as we look at the DOJ today. Our corrupt Attorney General Merrick Garland came out and said that we're going to take a new attack on Russian influence peddling during the election. Now, this is going on all the time, right? Iran hates us, and they are trying to influence us in the election, hoping to get us to vote for Kamala Harris. China hates us. They just found a multi-million-dollar spy who formerly was the assistant chief of staff to the New York governor. And she was working for China. China's trying to affect us. They're trying to get Kamala Harris elected. The Russians, they keep telling us they're trying to get Trump elected, and that's why Merrick Garland focused on that, but I'm not convinced of that at all. So they have indicted a place called Tenet, and this is Lauren Chen, who worked for the Blaze until they found out about this, and then they fired her. She seems to have founded this place, and she seems to be mentioned in an indictment. They call her Founder 1 or Founder 2, and Tenet would draw in right-wingers and to give them their content, guys like Dave Rubin and Tim Pool, and would give them content and post it. Nobody ever went to the site. It's not a big deal, and that's why I don't really understand. But they were being paid, Dave and Tim were being paid big money. Now, this is interesting because Lauren contacted me in June and asked me to go on Tim Pool's show, and I guess this was connected with this, and she wanted me to debate Nick Fuentes. She said on the idea of Christ as King and other cultural issues, and I said I have no problem with Nick Fuentes on the idea of Christ as King. My problem with him is that he hates Jewish people. But she didn't offer me money, and these people were making millions. Tim got millions for his work on this. So they did go to Gorka, who we did the interview with, and they offered him money, and Gorka said, well, where's the money coming from? Because it was so much. It was a lot. It was not just 6 figures, it was 7 figures for their content. And Gorka said, sounds great. Where's the money coming from? And when he couldn't get an answer, Gorka went back to smoking his cigar. All right. So I'm not going to say, obviously, I don't think Dave Rubin is a Russian, spy or anything like that. I know Dave, he's a good guy, but he now has to admit that he's not as smart as Sebastian Gorka, and that may live with him for the rest of his life. That may bow his head forever. Now they're both going to be picking on me, but it's easy to get pulled into stuff like this. But this does seem like a legit thing. Even on their emails that they've got, Lauren is saying, oh, the Russians are paying us this and the Russians are paying us that. So this does seem a real thing. But is it the threat we're facing that these guys throw their little voice into this incredible inferno of media that we have in this country? How about the Obama-appointed judge Tanya Chutkan, who's trying to speed up the Trump election interference trial and says she doesn't care about the campaign. We're not going to let that affect it, which is a lie. If she didn't care, she'd slow the case down so it didn't get in the way of the campaign and we could elect people without the DOJ interfering. Or what about the dirty judge, Juan Merchan? We'll see what he says. He's supposed to make a decision today on whether he's going to hold off sentencing Donald Trump until after the election. I'll be really surprised if he does that, and I'd also be really surprised if anyone can define for me what it is that Trump was actually convicted of, because I have no idea. And more importantly, and more to the point, because all of this disinformation stuff is a way of the government taking control of our social media and controlling the flow of information. That's what it's really about. I have no trust in Merrick Garland. He's bent. He is absolutely mastered by the politics of his situation. I'm not even entirely convinced he's in charge of the Justice Department for real. But what about all the people who haven't said a word about Brazil shutting down X because they don't like conservative opinions? That's why they shut it down. They shut down X because they don't like conservative opinions. Now, we see what's happening in Britain, right? So we know what's coming in Britain, where you can't doubt that men can magically transform into women, or that Islam has a problem with violence, or that abortion should be met with silent prayer. And nobody is saying a word. Nobody is saying a word to protest what's happening in Brazil to Elon Musk. That is amazing. Nobody in America on the left, or in authority, to be honest with you, has come out and said, this is an atrocity. Brazil is a democracy, remember. I think it's the 4th largest democracy, maybe the 3rd. But they've shut down a social media just because they don't like what it is that Elon Musk allows to be said, and because Elon Musk is now basically in the Trump camp. Trump says he's going to help him with an efficiency department when he gets elected. And all I I'm glad to hear that because I know Elon Musk is rich enough to get a bulldozer, and that would be a great way to deal with the Department of Education and the EPA and a lot of other government departments. But the thing is, they're not standing up to Brazil because they want this here in America. Here is Kamala Harris talking about social media to the NAACP.
And will put the Department of Justice of the United States back in the business of justice. We will double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of hate, if you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable as a community.
They are coming for the First Amendment. There is no question about it. I think if Merrick Garland wants to help this country and preserve our democracy, he should indict Merrick Garland. He's persecuted abortion opponents. He's jailed political opponents like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro. He's persecuted the January 6th protesters for nothing most of the time. Some of them deserved a kick in the butt, but the way their sentences have been way, way overblown. We have to watch him to protect ourselves because we know they hate free speech. Where there's no God, we're going to call this the horror movie fallacy. Where there's no God, or God is the bad guy, spirituality is the bad guy, the powerful, as Nietzsche told us, have to make a new morality, and in their perfection, they are justified in their own minds in persecuting the imperfect rest of us. But because there is a God, because there actually is a God. This is the only problem with not believing in God. It's not like you're a bad guy if you're an atheist. It's just you're not seeing reality clearly. If God is the bad guy because he impinges on your freedom by expecting you to do good instead of evil, then the powerful make morality. And of course, because there is a God, every action taken by the perfect people who are going to control us to make us good and ban hate, because they define what hate is, every action has the exact opposite effect of what they say it will have. And I'll show you what I mean. Now, the average Joe does not eat half of the recommended serving sizes of fruits and vegetables in a day. But look at me. I don't look a day over 35 because I've been informed of the importance of making sure I'm staying on top of my health in these young middle-aged years. Let's call them youthful years, let's call them. With Balance of Nature fruits and veggies, there's never been a more convenient dietary supplement to ensure you get a wide variety of fruits and vegetables on a daily basis. Imagine trying to eat 31 different fruits and vegetables every day. Doesn't sound like fun. It's time-consuming. Balance of Nature is the way to go. It provides an on-the-go solution by taking 31 different fruits and vegetables, freeze-drying them, turning them into a powder, and then putting them into a capsule. It can't get more convenient than that. Go to balanceofnature.com and use promo code Klavan for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer, plus get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Klavan. You'll be saying to yourself, wow, how do you spell Klavan? It's Klavan.
There are no easy Klavan.
Chapter 3, The Vampire Called Lies. You know, in between Chapter 2 and 3, I just got word that Juan Merchan, the judge in New York, has delayed sentencing Trump till after the election, after the voting, which is excellent news, I think, and they probably just thought if they sentenced him, it would help him. However, the debate is coming up. I should remind you that the most consequent, this is a huge debate, Trump and Harris. There'll probably only be one because Harris hasn't got the guts to come out. They will face off on Tuesday, September 10th, and we're going backstage to bring you a live simulcast of the debate and reactions from the most trusted voices in conservative media, namely us. So join me, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, and Jeremy Boring for full coverage and analysis. Watch live on DailyWire Plus. So let's take a look at the effects of censorship. Here's another thing I was doing this week between watching horror movies. I was editing my new book on evil in literature. This is a new nonfiction book, kind of not a sequel, but an adjunct to The Truth and Beauty. This is about evil in literature and in movies. And in the book, there's a quote, and I was just going over it, by a guy named Daryl Cooper, who has a podcast called Martyr Made. And he did an episode about Dostoevsky and Nietzsche that I took a quote from because he made an interesting comment. Now, if you're paying attention, you may have heard that Tucker Carlson interviewed Cooper, whom he called the best popular historian in the country. And Cooper's podcast sprung to the top of the ratings in the controversy that followed. Now, here's something I want to say before I get into this. Recently, I was in church, and there was this lovely woman who was a visitor to the church, and she came up to me and she said, "I understand you're a famous scholar." And I laughed and I said, "My son is a scholar. I'm an artist." That's not false modesty, okay? I'm an extraordinarily well-read man. As Knowles always says, I've read all the books, and I think I have a unique way of understanding the world that I think can be helpful and make people see things in a different and unique and interesting way. But I speak as an artist. I use the skills and the experience that I have and the talent that I have as an artist to see the world in the way I see the world. My son is a scholar, which is also a thing. He has the mind, Spencer, no relation. He has the mind of a scholar. He has the skills and the memory of a scholar, and he has the training of a scholar. Daryl Cooper, this guy that Tucker Carlson says the best popular historian in America, is not a historian of any kind, popular or any other kind. Now, because I wanted to hear his insight about Dostoevsky and Nietzsche, I listened to that podcast that he did, and this happens to be a subject that I know really well, and he got plenty of facts wrong, and he got context wrong. He did have this one comment that I thought was a good insight. He's not a stupid man, but he hasn't got the breadth or the depth of or accuracy of historical knowledge required to see things rightly in a big sense or put them in their proper context. So Carlson is not interviewing a historian, which is a form of scholar. He's interviewing a guy who has opinions. And just like with Andrew Tate, Tucker interviewed this guy and basically slobbered on him and let him go forth. And Cooper came on and made a lot of unfactual statements about World War II, that Churchill was the instigator of the war, that Hitler wanted peace, that the Holocaust was a sort of act of mercy. Oops, we've arrested all these people and we can't feed them. They're going to starve. Oh, I know what we'll do. We'll kill them. What a nice Hitler. You know, all of the stuff, it's just not true. It's not the facts. So, you know, German insecurity and militarism and aggression had a lot to do with starting World War I. World War I wiped out a generation and really destroyed the greatest culture mankind had ever made, the culture of Europe. And in the bitterness of their well-deserved defeat, Germany ultimately raised a homicidal psychopath to leadership. And the idea that Hitler wanted peace is 100% nonsense. He lied every time he offered peace. Every time they gave him peace, he invaded another country. He took over people. He enslaved them. And whenever he invaded country, his guys came in and started wiping out Jews. He was obsessed with killing Jews. And that led to a war that leveled Europe, killed something like 2% of the human race. Just an absolutely terrible thing that Hitler did. That was bad. Now, because our leaders have become oppressive and censorious and think that they can tell us what to say, and because they lie and lie and lie all the time, and they're close to becoming tyrants, they really are, it gives credence to people who defy them even when they're in the wrong, right? So our experts, elites, and communicators are intellectually corrupt. They come out and tell us misinformation about the Hunter Biden's laptop, about COVID, about Trump and the Russians and all this stuff. And then a guy like Daryl Cooper comes out and he says all this stuff that's wrong. And he says, well, the reason he says it, you know, and the public is hungry for truth. They're waiting for somebody to defy these corrupt liars who are pouring misinformation and then censoring us because we say the truth and they call it misinformation and sending out the force of law against us, the DOJ against us, and we're sick of it and we're angry. And what's the effect? The effect is that it makes this guy, Daryl Cooper, sound like a rebel speaking up against our sacred beliefs, okay? And that's what he basically says in this interview with Tucker Carlson, and what he's been saying ever since into the storm of controversy that followed what he said. This is cut 11.
And whenever you have a historical event that is mythologized, and when I say that, I don't mean myth like that's a myth, that's a lie. That's not what I mean. I mean that it's a formative part of how we all understand the world we're in, or at least officially, like the official world. Like that's
the structures we live in.
The structures we live in. It's the justification for a lot of those structures, right? Whenever you have those things, you're going to have taboos. You're going to have certain ways that certain topics have to be talked about that are going to guarantee that topic is just profoundly misunderstood.
And this is what he means, that Winston Churchill has been called a hero. He's been he's idolized and all this stuff. And so we know all these people are lying to us, and we're waiting for people who have the temerity, the courage, like Donald Trump, to come out and stand up against them. And here's Darryl Cooper standing up against them. And when you say, well, just because everything I said is untrue and my values are skewed, it's just because you think this is sacred. But let's stop for a minute and ask the question, is he really telling the truth? Is the idea that America was all good and Churchill was all good and FDR was all good, is that really so sacred that no one has ever spoken up before? Because there have been approximately 1 million histories written about World War II and that period of time. I've read a whole lot of them and a whole lot of the books about World War I. And they are filled with criticism of the errors and the oversteps and the mistakes and the bad actions, or what the author of that history thinks are bad actions. And just in my field, the arts, right? I don't know if you've ever heard of the book Slaughterhouse-Five, but in the 60s, in the second half of the 20th century, it was one of the most powerful and critically loved and best-selling books written. It was written by Kurt Vonnegut, who was in the firebombing of Dresden, and it deplored the firebombing of Dresden as an atrocity. This is America bombed the city of Dresden, wiped it, destroyed it to rubble, and a lot of civilians were killed, and there was some facility next to it, but basically it has been looked at often as an atrocity. And this is a famous book, Slaughterhouse-Five. And then just recently, we had the film Oppenheimer by Christopher Nolan. It was a smash, and it raised serious questions, moral questions about the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I actually disagreed with it. I'm also have mixed feelings about the bombing of Dresden, but I disagreed with the film, but no one called for it to be censored. Nobody shook their fist at Christopher Nolan and said, how dare you? And Ben feels the exact opposite of the attitude of the film and the exact opposite of the way the film presents Oppenheimer. He didn't call for it to be censored. He disagreed with it, right? So sure, because our elites are corrupt, it's possible someone could be attacked because he's a fearless truth teller in a world of lies, but it just so happens that Cooper is wrong factually and he's twisted morally. This also has to do with the horror movie fallacy, right? That evil is spiritual, but good is human. So because the anti-Semitism, which is hidden in Darryl Cooper's thinking, there's no question about it. He is hiding an anti-Semitic strain of thought in which we bombed Nagasaki because there were Christians there, and Hitler was actually he actually says Hitler was trying to deal with the Jewish problem. There was not a Jewish problem. There was an immigration problem in Germany where a lot of the Jews from Russia came over, but the Jews of Germany were just, all they wanted was to be loyal Germans. There was a hatred problem and a psychopathy problem in Hitler and Germany. And so when you are, as I've said a million times, and even Ben doesn't like to hear me say this, anti-Semitism like that, virulent anti-Semitism, is a hatred of one Jew, Jesus Christ. It's a hatred of Jesus Christ for infiltrating Western society with the Jewish God and his Jewish ideas of love and taking care of the poor and all of that. That just because you fly a Christian flag or you fly an atheist flag, that's not the point. The point is, if you hate the Jews and whatever they do is bad, it's probably because you hate the big Jew in the sky. So Cooper does this thing with the horror movie fallacy that people are good. There are no good people in war because there are no good people. No one is righteous. No, not one. No one is righteous. So he talks about Churchill's flaws and his bad actions, but there are no righteous people in war because there are no righteous people. What there is sometimes in war is a right side and a wrong side because there is a spiritual good. And people are flawed and sinful and bent, but you do have to leave them free to work out their salvation in fear and trembling and move toward that spiritual good. And if you're invading people and enslaving people and murdering people and sending children into a gas chamber with poison gas where they die in their mother's arms while their mothers die, you're on the wrong side. You're not a rebel for saying, oh, that may have been a good idea. You're just an idiot. You're a moral fool. And to deny that is not truth-telling. And I got to tell you something. I don't know what's in Tucker Carlson's mind. I truly don't. He did some good work at Fox. But I wish he would think again, because just defying the authorities is not enough to make you right. You got to be on the right side of history. And this is wrong history on the wrong side. A few years back, members of the world's elite met at the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and launched the Great Reset Initiative. The Great Reset sounds ominous, but what exactly is their plan, and what does it mean for America? In short, they aim to transform the world economy. Founder and director of the forum, Klaus Schwab, even wrote, "We need a great reset of capitalism. If successful, their plan would destroy the American way of life." Hillsdale College, and you've heard me talk about them before. I love these guys. I taught there for a little while. Held a conference. Hillsdale held a conference on the Great Reset, and you can view and learn from the speakers through an online video series. Hillsdale's video series will give you insight into the origins and leaders of the Great Reset, how the ideology of woke capitalism is infiltrating large corporations, the Great Reset from China's perspective, alternatives to the Great Reset, and more. If you believe that our country's founding principles have made it the freest, most prosperous nation in history, or you're alarmed by the growing influence of the so-called global elite like I am, then Hillsdale College's video series is a must-watch. Get instant access to the Great Reset video series today by going to hillsdale.edu/Klavan. It's free, it's easy to sign up, and you know it's worth your time because it's from Hillsdale. Go to hillsdale.edu/Klavan, hillsdale.edu/Klavan to sign up now. You'll be smart enough after you watch this to be able to spell Klavan. There are no E's in Klavan. I just make it look this easy. Final chapter, the serial killer called ideology. So let's go back to the idea of anti-Semitism, which, as I say, is almost, there's a kind of normal anti-Semitism, if I can say that. We all hate each other. All people hate each other. All different groups of people hate each other. And there's a kind of, I don't want this guy in my club. He's black, he's Jewish, whatever. Or he's white, whatever it is. There's always that kind of feeling, tribal feeling in the human heart. It's just one of the many, many things, aspects of being sinful and broken as we all are. But I'm talking about this ideological hatred of Jews, this kind of ferocious, febrile, virulent hatred of Jews, where all of history is just Jews plotting against people when Jews have been such great contributors, have done so many good things, and have been such an important part of the history of the West and such an important positive part of the history of the West. So that kind of anti-Semitism, as I say, is always really founded in God hatred. And you can say that you believe in God, you can pretend that you believe in God, you can go to church every Sunday and still hate God. That is not something that is, as I'm sure you probably know from your own church or temple, you probably know people who are like that actually are going through the motions, and what they really like is the idea of themselves as pious, which is the horror movie fallacy, that the spirit world is evil, but the person can be good. My priest always has a very funny line. He says whenever people tell him that they're not religious, but they're spiritual, he always says it's true of Satan too, because Satan is a completely spiritual being. So when we see this Israel situation and this war in Gaza and this fight in Gaza, we should not be surprised that both the right and the left are against the Israelis, which is an amazing thing. 6 hostages were just murdered by the Iranian-backed terrorist Hamas. This is just Iran, who wants death to America. So anybody who is supporting Hamas is supporting death to America. Don't make no mistake about this. There is no Hamas that's just, we're for the Palestinian people, or, we're against colonialism. They would colonize the world as quickly as they possibly could. This is Iran we're fighting. They are colonial, imperial, insane terrorist power, and Hamas is just one arm of them. They murdered 6 Israeli hostages. One of them was a young Israeli American named Hirsch Goldberg Poland, 23. He lost an arm during the original attack. As the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, were coming to rescue these guys, they shot them in the back of the head. Let's have a clip of the funeral of this young man, cut 4.
The most common word that I've received from people, thousands of messages, is slicha. I'm sorry. Hirsch, we failed you. We all failed you. You would not have failed you. You would have pushed harder for justice. You would have worked to understand the other, to bridge differences.
Hirsch, for all these months, I have been in such torment and worry about you for every single millisecond of every single day. Now I no longer have to worry about you. I know you are no longer in danger. You are with beautiful honor. He will show you around. You will hopefully meet my grandparents who will adore you. I pray that your death will be a turning point in this horrible situation in which we are all entangled.
Now, this is an American, he's got dual citizenship, but he's an American. I don't, you probably don't remember the Achille Lauro where a Jewish man was killed by Islamic extremists and Reagan was there and they said, do we have to strike back? And he was like, this is an American. Of course we do. And that's the way we should be feeling now. And here is Joe Biden answering questions about this. This is cut 5.
Are you planning to present a final hostage deal for the both sides this week?
We're very close to that.
What makes you think that this deal will be successful in a way that the other deals were not?
Hope springs eternal.
Mr. President, do you think it's time for Prime Minister Netanyahu to do more on this issue? Do you think he's doing enough?
No.
See, he's not doing enough. Netanyahu is not doing enough. These guys parachute into his country. They slaughter people, women, children. They rape women to death. They kill children in front of their parents. They kill parents in front of their children. They kidnap these hostages. Who's the problem? Benjamin Netanyahu. So Netanyahu goes off on this. This is cut 6.
I want to set the record straight. On April 27th, Secretary of State Blinken said that Israel made an extraordinarily generous offer for a hostage deal. On May 31st, Israel agreed to a U.S.-backed proposal. Hamas refused. On August 16th, Israel agreed to what the United States defined as a final bridging proposal. Hamas refused again. On August 19th, Secretary Blinken said, Israel accepted the U.S. proposal. Now Hamas must do the same. On August 28th, that's 5 days ago, Deputy CIA Director said that Israel shows seriousness in the negotiations. Now Hamas must show the same seriousness.
So that's the pattern. That's what's happened. They've tried and tried and tried and agreed and agreed and agreed, and Hamas won't give in, right? So it's not Benjamin Netanyahu. And now he says that Biden, after all these people have said that Netanyahu's done the right thing, Biden says, no, he's not doing enough. And here is Netanyahu's response to that, cut 7.
On August 28th, that's 5 days ago, Deputy CIA Director said that Israel shows seriousness in the negotiations. Now Hamas must show the same seriousness. I want to ask you something. What has changed in the last 5 days? What has changed? One thing. These murderers executed 6 of our hostages. They shot them in the back of the head. That's what's changed. And now after this, we're asked to show seriousness? We're asked to make concessions? What message does this send Hamas? It says, kill more hostages, murder more hostages, you'll get more concessions.
So I just want to remind you, just as a factual point, and this is all this is a factual point, is that Israel did not occupy Gaza. They were out of Gaza. Gaza could have been turned. It's on the Mediterranean. If you look at a map, it's sitting on the Mediterranean. It could be a beautiful place. All this money was pouring in American aid and British aid. Where is that money? Well, I'll tell you where it is. The Hamas leaders are living like kings off that money while their people starve. So this is not, there's all of this stuff about, colonization and genocide. It's all untrue. just as a living fact. It's all untrue. What you are dealing with is hatred of Jews. And as I sit here before you, I tell you in truth, and you will not hear this anywhere else, hatred of Jews is hatred of the God who became the God of the West through the Jew, Jesus Christ. That's all it is. That is all it is. The protesters who have now returned, as the students have returned to college, the protesters are back out in front of the colleges again, demanding that we support Hamas, demanding that we divest from Israel, demanding that that Jewish students, Jewish American students, should be tormented and insulted and excluded. All right, and so the question, and you can say, and listen, you may not like Benjamin Netanyahu. Plenty of Israelis don't like Benjamin Netanyahu. I think he's really good at what he does, but I also know he's not a nice person. He's a leader. He's a political leader. He's not going to be your pal. It doesn't matter whether he does right or wrong. I mean, of course it matters, but it doesn't matter to judging the issue because no one is righteous. No, not one. So there's no good people in this side, but there is a good and a bad side. There is a side that is the good side and a side that is the bad side because good and evil are spiritual forces, both of them. One, the good, comes from our old friend Uncle God, and the other, the bad, comes from those who have rebelled against God and taken themselves out of the world of goodness, right? And when you look at Israel and you see Muslims and Jews and Christians living together in peace with rights, with the ability to rise, with the ability to have positions of power, with the abilities to become celebrities and admired people in parts of the government and all of these things. And then you look, if you want to see the difference, go and build a church in Israel and then go and build a church in Iran and see how that works out for you, right? If you want to know where freedom lives, if you want to know where the good is, it's not the people. It's not the people. We're all messed up. We're all broken. It's the power, the spiritual power of the goodness. This is the problem with the horror movie fantasy. So why are they pressuring Benjamin Netanyahu? Because he's on the right side, because he has a conscience, because you can negotiate with him. You can say to him, save a life here, even if it costs you some dignity, some respect, even some security. He wants to do that. Hamas doesn't want to do that. We know this. We know that Hamas leaders want civilians to die because the useful idiots in America, like the man who is the president of the United States, God help us, because of those people will be moved to go to the one person who might listen to them because he's on the good side. If you don't understand that, if you don't understand that there is such a thing as spiritual good and we can move closer to it or further away, any one of us at any time can move closer to it or further away from that goodness, then you will end up on the wrong side. You will do things that have the opposite effect of what you think they're going to have. You will give power to the powerful to remake morality, and they will every single time remake that morality into evil. Let me close with this. This is Alexander Solzhenitsyn, a great rebel against the Soviet slave state, a Christian man. And he said, ideology, this is ideas through which we impose our idea of good over God's idea of good. That's what ideology essentially is. He says, ideology is what gives evildoing its long-sought justification and gives the evildoer the necessary steadfastness and determination. You remember what I told you about Camus saying that you have this idea that God is bad and you are perfectible and righteous, and therefore you are going to define good because God can't do it because he's evil, right? This is how that turns out. You remember we heard C.S. Lewis saying an oppression put on you for your own good is the worst kind because the guy will never have a conscience, the oppressor will never have a conscience to remove that. He's taught why this ideology is so powerful, because we all know we're broken, we all know we're sinful, we all feel ashamed, we don't want to think we're doing the wrong thing, we want to think we're doing the right thing. Solzhenitsyn says ideology is the social theory which helps to make the oppressor's acts seem good instead of bad in his own and others' eyes, so that he won't hear reproaches and curses, but will receive praise and honor like Hamas has been receiving from the left, from the AOC crowd, from the people who think that this is somehow fighting for the good. The enemy, we talk about socialism, and socialism always fails because it partakes of the horror movie fallacy, but that's not the enemy. The enemy is not Democrats. The enemy is not anyone. The enemy is this materialist idea that there is no God. And as I said before, I will close with this. It's not that you're a bad person because you can't believe in God. It's that you're wrong because God is really there, because there is a good toward which we move. The Ten Commandments, those are not hampering your freedom. Those are telling you what to get out of your way so you will be free, because you get that path to your true self, to your true God, to the true good. Look, watch the horror movies because they're telling you something. They're telling you that it will all the world will turn into a horror movie if we do not get the right idea. In a week, the Daily Wire's first ever theatrical release, Am I Racist?, will be hitting theaters across the nation. This is more than a comedy. It's a systematic dismantling of the left's entire DEI apparatus. And we have another sneak peek for you. Take a look at Matt Walsh's Am I Racist?
I used to be a white woman, an unsuccessful one, for many decades, and it was a miserable experience. And really, the hatred of yourselves and each other is like the not seeing your power, the being afraid. Like, all you do is talk shit about each other, talk shit about yourself. Oh my God, I'm so fat.
That's all they do. I'm telling you, these white women.
But that's it. It's I'm so fat, I'm so stupid, I'm blah blah blah.
Sorry.
Your kids are watching you. And they're watching you talking shit about each other, raging against the machine or being silent or whatever the hell it is that you're doing or not doing. And they know that you're not doing shit for them.
That's so important. That is so important what you just said. It's really important. That's all.
We may have to add you to our team.
Oh, I would love to take a seat and join you.
No, you're not allowed to.
Okay.
Definitely not allowed.
Okay. I do have my DEI certification that I got.
Okay.
So, not saying I'm an expert, but I'm also not a novice. So, okay.
White people are starved for these conversations.
We are. Yeah. We're so starving.
Yeah.
We are so starving for this.
Anyone else want to say anything?
I'll just say one thing. I'm so glad we can have these conversations, and I'll be done. But I'm just so glad that we could all get together to have these conversations. That's all I wanted to say.
Is he an actor? Are you an actor?
Oh, no.
Can you let us, we're trying to listen and trying to have this conversation.
Okay, we're all acting all the time in our lives. And I think that's part of the problem, That it's like we're all trying to play a part rather than just being real and having these uncomfortable conversations. And that's what I'm always trying to tell people, especially, white women, no offense. But
no, but see, like, you're a white dude. There's power positions and, it's white people pointing fingers at each other is not helpful.
I've been on this journey for so long, and just to see you guys at the table having this conversation has been really enlightening for me. Anyway, I got the DEI certification, and I'm just on the journey. All right, you ladies have a great night.
Decolonize yourself. Do your own white supremacy dismantling, and then you can start to bring in other people.
Can I just say one last thing? Can I just propose a toast? Just raise a glass if you're racist, and that's the thing.
Cheers. Oh, I'm not racist. Let me.
To racist. Well, all the rest of it. To racist.
They gonna say you racist. Am I Racist? In theaters September 13th. Rated PG-13. Buy tickets now.
All right, theaters are selling out fast and new venues are being added daily to meet the demand. Get your tickets now at amiracist.com. Klavan Klapbacks.
The power of Christ compels you! Mother's in here! The power of Christ compels you!
That was terrifying. Now I have to leave. Klavan Klapbacks at DailyWire.com. We really do love to hear from you. I cannot emphasize this enough. I know that I tease you about it because I tease everybody, but still, it's so important that we hear from you. It makes a big difference to the show, makes a big difference to my idea of what's going on in your heads. I already know what I'm thinking. I want to hear what you're thinking. Write to Klavan Klapbacks at DailyWire.com. Klavan is spelled with a K. Klapbacks is spelled with a K. Klavan Klapbacks at DailyWire.com. The first Klapback is from Katie McCann, to the one whom some call Hot Gandalf, which I would as well if I didn't think my husband might be listening. I think you've been unfair to National Review lately. Most of the vehement anti-Trumpers left NR for the Dispatch with Jonah Goldberg, so maybe you mean the Dispatch instead of NR. By the way, love your Cameron Winter series and can't wait for the next one to arrive. And thanks for all you do, especially for your praise of motherhood. Even growing up in a Christian home community in the Bible Belt, I never heard motherhood extolled like you extol it. Whenever you talk about it, I share that podcast with my sister, and we feel like we're being cheered on in a marathon. Oh, I always love hearing that because you are being cheered on, and it is. I do know it's a marathon, and I'm glad to hear you feel that way. I wanted to read this because I think you're right. I mean, basically, that's it. I keep referring to National Review, and what I'm really referring to was the writers who put out that Never Trump issue and could never actually change their mind and hear not just Trump, but the people whom Trump represents, the people who sent Trump out there to say what wasn't being said and to make themselves be known. And the fact that they could not overcome what I do believe at this point is intellectual pride and understand that, Trump has his flaws. He has major flaws, but the people who sent Trump are people who were forgotten both by the left and the elites of the right. And I think that that's a really important thing. And we didn't take enough time, or certain people didn't take enough time to see it. And I think that National Review has righted itself. Charlie Cook is there, and I love him. Andy McCarthy is there. No one better. I think that you're absolutely right, Katie. And I thank you for pointing it out, and I won't do it anymore because you're right. What I'm doing is I'm using a sort of a code word that represented something, but it no longer represents that, and I think that's a totally fair criticism. So the next one is from Rick. Drew, can you unpack your thoughts on what media means? Who are the media, and how did the industry become such a den of iniquity? P.S. I'm looking forward to cracking open the Cameron Winter books again. I read each of them just before the new one is shipped. So this year I'm looking forward to reading all 4. Women Underground. Pre-order it. It matters. It really does matter. It's a very important part of building the culture. I know I'm just one guy. I know it's books, and books are not as big and flashy as movies, but it's still important. So please pre-order Women Underground. Plus, you'll like it. It's a really good book. And the series I think is terrific. All right. So what is media? It's a really important question, actually, because media is simply a medium for transporting information. And yet, if you don't think that the medium is the medium is the message, as they used to say. And if you don't think that's true, just consider the printing press. Consider the difference between a Martin Luther putting up his, 95 Theses and saying, attacking some of the practices of the Catholic Church without the printing press, and then think what happens when there is a printing press and people are literally being burned alive because a new translation of the Bible or a new tract or a new idea can be spread around the world to anybody who can read because of the printing press. Well, think about that multiplied a gazillion by the internet, and you will understand the fight we're in right this moment. It is at the core of almost everything. Look, nothing is caused by one thing, but that is the core of the crisis that we're in, is the new medium, the new information, and it has become taken over by one group of people. They don't want to lose their power. It is also a threat to that group of people, and that's where the evil is coming from. We are going to move on to member block. So you want to become a member right now. Right now, it's like a black wave of Klavanless, a tidal wave, a tsunami. A Klavanless tsunami is coming, rushing toward you, and you only have moments to go to dailywire.com/subscribe and use code Klavan to check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. If you haven't done that, splash. You're gone into Klavanlessness. The rest of you you can start dog paddling very quickly and swim with me into member block.
Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up, I never thought much about race. It never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me.
Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey.
I'm going to sort this out I need to go deeper undercover.
They gon' say I'm racist.
Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Here's my certification.
And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. Listen more for you in this field.
Is America inherently racist?
The word inherent is challenging there.
I want to rename the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument.
America is racist to its bones.
So inherently.
Yeah, this country is a piece of
White
folks,
white
trash,
White supremacy.
white woman, white boy.
Is there a black person around? What's a black person right here? Does he not
They gon'
exist?
say I'm racist.
Hi, Robin.
Hi, what's your name?
I'm Matt.
I just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
They gon' say you racist.
Buy your tickets now. In theaters September 13th. Rated PG-13.